What's up, y'all? It's your boy JTMM, aka Just 10 More Minutes, aka the Freaking 10, back again with more Sabaton history, and this time the defense of Moscow. Now, in listening to the song yesterday, I absolutely loved the song. The power behind it, the guitar, there wasn't a single piece of it where I went, oh, that didn't fit. So now we're getting into the history. Now, in comparison to the last song about Moscow, which I think covered more towards the end of that invasion, where I think this one may be the bigger picture. But we'll see. I don't know. I didn't get a gist of what time period of the invasion it was, if it was beginning, end, etc. But that's just my gut feeling based on that other song. Y'all knows how crappy my memory is, but something reminds me that it was more about towards the end of that, when they gave that final defense and that final push out where they retreated. But I honestly don't remember. But with this, let's check it out.
I'm Indy Nidell.
And I'm Joachim from Sabaton.
And this is another exciting, thrill-packed episode of Sabaton history.
And this week, it's the defense of Moscow.
Defense of Moscow in 1941. The Axis invasion of the USSR in World War II was codenamed Operation Barbarossa, and the drive on Moscow, Operation Typhoon. Before I talk about this, I will say that it is an enormous subject, and over on my World War II weekly channel, I covered the events of Barbarossa, the largest invasion in history, week by week, each and every week in detail, with a whole bunch of special episodes about things like logistics and planning and all. Please check that out for a better understanding. There is a link below. Anyhow, on June 22nd, 1941, Germany and her allies began what was supposed to be Adolf Hitler's magnum opus, the conquest of the Soviet Union. Communism would be destroyed, and Germany would have unlimited space for living, unlimited resources to live off, and the Slavic peoples as a servant class for the master Aryans. Despite the massive buildup of millions of soldiers across the border, the attack took the Soviet Union completely by surprise. Joseph Stalin had been warned repeatedly over the year of planning that went into the offensive that it was going to happen, but he didn't believe it, even thinking by the summer of 1941 that the rumors were a British plot to get him to turn on Germany. See, up until June 22nd, Germany and the USSR were operating under the terms of the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact, which had divided Eastern Europe into zones of conquest between the two powers. Germany was also importing huge amounts of oil every month from the USSR. Still, anyone who read Mein Kampf could see that one day Hitler was going to make an all-out attack on the USSR. It was his ultimate military goal.
I wonder why Stalin would think that. I mean, because you're talking about 41, right? So you've already seen what he's done in the other side, right? With other battles. And I'm sure he's heard at this point, given limited communication again, it's not the super information highway we have today. But that shocks me that Stalin wouldn't believe that he would do that. I wonder if it was truly that he didn't believe, or he didn't take it seriously. He believed he would, but then maybe thought, I don't know, maybe he didn't truly believe it. Maybe he was that arrogant to think that Hitler wouldn't do that. I don't know if that's arrogance and thinking, look at the size of us compared to you and we would destroy you. So no, you wouldn't attack us. Huh. Again, this is another reason why, I truly think I'll dive into Indy's channel, because the psychological part of this is the part that fascinates me as to why they felt this. I understand Hitler's part, right? Dude was mental. Okay. I don't mince words when I say that. Dude was mental into thinking he could do what he wanted to do. But we see that with a lot of world leaders where they get that power, and they have these grand plans of, their country being a superpower, and then they get put in their place. Um, oh, that's fascinating. All right, let's keep going. We're already 2 minutes in, and I'm already like, that doesn't, yeah. Wow.
June 22nd, 1941 was that day. That had not been the original date, though. It had been set for May 15th. I am aware that there are many people who believe the invasions of Greece or Yugoslavia or Crete in the spring of 1941 are what altered the timetable, but that is not the case. Before you comment, I should point out that history is what actually happened, not what we would like to have happened. The invasion of Greece was planned simultaneously with Barbarossa already back in late 1940. All the units were allocated already then and had their timetables when they had to head north for Barbarossa. And that invasion went more quickly than planned. The lightning conquest of Yugoslavia allowed that to happen. And the decision to attack Crete was not even made until after the Barbarossa date had been changed. The reason for the date changing was the lateness of the spring floods in 1941. You cannot bring 3.5 million men, 600,000 horses, and hundreds of thousands of tanks, trucks, cars, and motorcycles over the marshy, muddy ground created when the rivers of Eastern Europe break their banks in the flooding. It is physically impossible. And the ground was not hard enough for the invasion to possibly take place until the second week of June at the earliest. Anyhow, the enormous offensive was hugely successful straight off the bat. And over the summer, prisoners were taken by the hundreds of thousands as panzer thrusts surrounded cauldrons of entire Soviet armies. But even during its greatest successes, the operational flaws of Barbarossa could be seen. The Soviet Union has two great advantages in warfare: endless men and endless space. And the colossal distances involved for the attackers to cross and supply wreaked havoc with German logistics already by early July. There were few roads, and German trains were a different gauge from the Soviet ones. So whole new track systems had to be built because the Soviets destroyed their rolling stock, installations, and, well, everything as they fell back or were pushed back. Also, whereas in the Battle of France, the panzers could fill their tanks at roadside gas stations, the Soviets used a different octane gasoline. Basically, everything that was needed to supply the millions of men
Wow.
and their animals and vehicles had to be brought in from further and further away as the summer turned to autumn and the Soviet resistance grew stiffer and stiffer.
Now, see, to me, that's fascinating. And so that begs the question of why they set it up like that. Was it so that they could be their own? Could they be their own power? Meaning they didn't rely on anybody else but themselves? And why they would, build their tracks differently? Why they would build or use the different octane? Was it more efficient? What was the driving forces behind them to set everything up literally, which would be proprietary? Was that a defense mechanism? Because if so, I've got to give credit where credit's due, and that's brilliant. It limits your outside, right, as far as trade and things like that, because you'd have to modify your own to be able to take goods and goods and services, whether it's men or resource, etc., and modify it to go outside. But truly, if you're acting as truly your own resource kit if I could say it that way. That's brilliant. Wow. Huh. I mean, and I apologize for the pause there, but I sit here and I think about it and I'm like, wow, you truly have set up your entire country propriety uh, with railroads, fuel. You're limiting yourself on the inside to bring resources out, but when you have the land that you have, you depend on no one. That's fascinating to me. I may touch on why at the end.
As the Wehrmacht overrun, Russia 1941. They don't belong, we stand our ground, 1,000,000 strong. We are ready for the strike, face the army of the Reich, 1,000,000 strong. This is our land, they don't belong.
But this episode is not about Operation Barbarossa. It is about Operation Typhoon, the German drive on Moscow. The orders for the operation are issued September 6th and call for the destruction of the forces blocking the Moscow road in the limited time which remains available before the onset of the winter weather. Operation Typhoon begins October 2nd. Hitler announces, "Today begins the last great decisive battle of the year. At last, we have created the prerequisites for the final tremendous blow, which, before the onset of winter, will lead to the destruction of the enemy." Actually, the night before, he issues a proclamation to be read to the troops that, in barely 3 months, you have taken over 2 million prisoners. You have destroyed or captured 17,500 tanks and over 21,000 guns. You have downed or destroyed on the ground 14,200 planes. The world has never seen anything like this. Which may well be true, but, they still haven't won. Dr. Heinrich Happe, who's been with the spearheads of Barbarossa since June 22nd, writes that in spite of such staggering losses, east of the Meja, the Russians prepared a strong system of trenches, bunkers, tank traps, and barbed wire entanglements, brought up supplies, and gathered their strength to stand against us once more. And just a side note, there is no guarantee that even taking Moscow will mean the fall of the Soviet Union.
Right.
Yet the offensive immediately breaks through the Soviet positions. Panzer Group 4 advances 15 kilometers that day. Panzer Group 3, 20. On the 3rd in Berlin, Adolf Hitler gives his first national address since Barbarossa began. On the morning of June 22nd, the greatest struggle in the history of the world began. Today, I can state that everything has gone to plan. I may say today that this opponent has already broken down and will never rise again. By that evening, the Panzers have advanced a full 50 kilometers. Panzer Army Commander Heinz Guderian reports snow on October 6, but as John Keegan points out, it's hard to know which would be better for the attackers, a long autumn or an early winter. A long autumn will mean trying to advance through roads turned into swamps by the rains, which might not be possible, but an early Russian winter, will freeze the roads solid enough but will bring blizzards and frostbite. As planned, while the Germans advance, Russian peasants set fire to the already harvested crops, blow up village buildings, and drive the animals away. They will leave behind literally nothing but blackened earth for the Germans. And the Red Army is really starting to fight back. And yet, the armored rings of Army Group Center's 3 panzer groups are slowly closing. But already after the first few days, Guderian's and Hermann Hoth's panzers cannot advance temporarily for lack of fuel. The Luftwaffe does not have any sort of aerial supremacy, and the Red Air Force is making life difficult for the Germans on the ground. However, Soviet Army Chief of Staff Boris Shaposhnikov gets a report that a German column, 20 kilometers long, is advancing unopposed on Yukhnov, around a third of the way to Moscow. The plain fact is, German units are operating behind Soviet lines with nothing between them and Moscow. Joseph Stalin says to mobilize everything and hold the Germans for a week till they can bring in reserves. A new defense line should be built west of Moscow, anchored on Mozhaisk. The Western, Bryansk, and Reserve fronts are now authorized to withdraw, but it seems to be too late. By the 7th, disaster is unfolding. Georgy Zhukov has arrived from Leningrad to take over Moscow's defense, but he sees the scale of the disaster. Both the Western and Reserve fronts are in a huge pocket centered on Vyazma, and the road to Moscow is, in fact, open. Exciting, isn't it?
That's this shit's fascinating. It really, really is fascinating. And I may have said this on other videos, but when it comes to history, I love history. But I've never been one to get into the whole war scene. You know, I never watched Band of Brothers and jumped on that bandwagon, or any of the military shows. But this has turned me into kind of a fan. I don't know that I'll ever still watch those. But there is a lot of psychological power in this. And I don't know if true military, generals and such go back and study this, or if leaders go back and study this. Obviously, in today's world, leaders don't study anything because they're making the same damn mistakes that, leaders in the past did, and nobody's learning anything. But this utterly fascinates me with the psychology of the strategic warfare. It truly is a game of chess. It really is. Man. So they had essentially gotten the Russians, because you see that pocket closing, right? So you would have had that many troops around it. Okay, I want to know what happens next.
In Stalin's orders, defend the motherland, Moscow shall not fall. Standing for command, the blood for the whole.
God, I love this song.
Hear the mother's call, raise for the storm. Moscow will never give in, there is no surrender. Force them into retreat and into defeat.
The weather changes at the end of the first week. Colder, and with rain and snow. The Rasputitsa, the autumn mud, is beginning. Vasily Grossman writes, there's rain, snow, hailstones, a liquid bottomless swamp, black pastry mixed by thousands and thousands of boots, wheels, caterpillars, and everybody is happy once again. The Germans must get stuck in our hellish autumn. But Army Group Center's war diary that day proclaims, all corps have the order, forwards, forwards, forwards. By mid-month, there is panic in Moscow, and people evacuate east. But Zhukov has mobilized 250,000 Muscovites, most of them women, to build the city's defenses. After 3 weeks of Typhoon, stubborn defense and ever more mud, snow, and ice have prevented the Germans from reaching the city. But all the while, the German papers have proclaimed impending victory. American journalist Howard Smith in Berlin says that now really comes the breaking point for many German people in terms of trusting their government's accurate reporting of the war. Joseph Goebbels' diary says, our victory news is no longer accepted with the required attention and necessary importance. And even as Vyazma falls, it drives home the question to the average German soldier, just how big is the Red Army? Because they're still not beaten. Vyazma is just the first hurdle. And when Stalin gets the intelligence that the Japanese will definitely not attack the Soviets in the east until at least the spring of 1942, he orders half of the divisional strength of the Far East to head west to hold Moscow. That's more than 8 divisions with 1,000 tanks and 1,000 planes. 500,000 people are now working on the city's defenses, but the Germans are just 100 kilometers away. However, the Blitz tactics, which had so utterly shattered the Soviet front in early October, when conditions were dry and the Panzer forces more tightly concentrated, were now impossible. On October 30th, Operation Typhoon comes to a halt until the winter weather can freeze the ground enough for some mobility to return for the Germans. On November 7th, Joseph Stalin gives his famous speech of defiance in Red Square and the October Revolution parade, promising the destruction of the German invaders. Their drive is renewed November 15th in minus 20-degree weather. Lubricating oil freezes, rifle bolts break, sentries freeze to death, but the German advance continues. Advance units cross the Volga-Moscow Canal. General Konstantin Rokossovsky gets the order. Kryukovo is the final point of withdrawal. There can be no further falling back. There is nowhere to fall back to. The canal is now the last big obstacle before Moscow is surrounded from the north. On the morning of November 28th, German panzers are not more than 35 kilometers from the Kremlin. Erich Hepner's 4th Panzers take Krasnaya Poliana November 30th and are now in artillery range of Moscow. In the morning of December 1st, Gunther von Kluge's 4th Army launches a furious attempt to take the shortest route to Moscow, the Minsk-Moscow Highway. By noon, the Soviets have been pushed back several kilometers, and the Germans are 7 kilometers from the highway. Should they reach the highway and split the Soviet 5th and 33rd Armies, well, Zhukov cannot allow that to happen, so he throws everything he has left into the breach. On December 2nd, a German combat engineer patrol reaches Khimki, 18 kilometers from the city center, on a scouting mission. This is the closest the Germans get to Moscow. In a deep and terrible freeze, with German soldiers screaming in the snow that they could not go on, the last German bid for Moscow had failed. On December 4th, it is minus 37 degrees. Blizzards have begun, and the Wehrmacht has been stretched to its breaking point and has failed. And at 3 a.m., December 5th, the Great Red Army counteroffensive begins. But that, my friends, is a story for another day.
Face the bullets.
You know, it boggles my mind. I get it, but at the same time, I really think to myself, okay, you know what Russian winters are like. What makes you think, from a German point of view, that you would want to advance during this time? So I get it in the sense of, you know, you had the battle, you had the Yugoslavia and the other battles that Germany had to advance to get to that stage. But man, would it have been smarter to hold that region until winter had passed, and then you can make that same drive with the same tactics that you used before? Would that have turned out any differently? Why would you think you could do that in the winter? I mean, truly, was it that? That's the fascinating part to me. And it's, I'm not the first to question it, obviously. But that's the part that fascinates me is, I mean, you're really talking about playing into their hands with, you know, the autumn mud, as they said, and you trying to cross in these conditions that very few humans would be able to accelerate in, much less at a high probability of victory. Wow. All right, let's get into what I'm assuming is going to be with Joachim talking about the cover.
Of their guns, Russia's daughters and her sons are the brave who stand against the Typhoon wave.
But what is the tale for today? I'll ask you a question in a second, but this is the first episode with you that we've done in this new set.
Yes.
So what do you think?
So far, so good. It's
Yeah.
the first shot. There's a bit of sand on the floor. So it's really super beautiful. Even the historical part that we saw was the first part of 4.
Yeah, this is all new, and this is so this is what's going to be the set for the next 11, 12 episodes, whenever
like
they
that.
get to come out. Now, I'm holding a grenade.
Why?
Well, I can't let go of it because then we'll have to build another set. Okay, but enough about me. The tale for today, all right? Tale for today, the defense of Moscow.
Yes.
Okay, well, tell me a little bit about this.
This is a bit of an unusual song, actually, because it's a cover. We've done covers before.
Yeah.
But this is a cover of a Russian guy called Radio Tapok. And in the past, he's done Sabaton covers. I would say, well, some of the most famous ones would be Attack of the Dead Men,
Right.
Night Witches, but check him out, seriously. He's done a lot more stuff. And he made this song about the defense of Moscow
Right.
in the style of Sabaton. So
Okay.
it's his song that he did in the style of Sabaton. And we thought, well, he's done a bunch of covers on us. Why don't we
do.
make a cover of his stuff, you know?
See, that's cool.
But, you know, in terms of covers,
That's really
everyone, every band at some point does a cover of something, even if it's just messing around in their rehearsal room and stuff. What about you guys?
Oh, well, there's been quite a few. We've done, lately, we did some, well, I think one of the most famous ones or popular ones was In the Army Now, which is what I think most people would think is a status quo song, but it's actually a Bolland and Bolland song. So we
Yeah.
made a cover of the cover, I guess.
Now, when you guys first got together, your first rehearsals and stuff, were you already writing songs then, or was it mostly just covers until you know, beefed up your own repertoire?
A bit of everything, actually. When we started out and, you know, sort of, you know, had people coming and going and became Sabaton. I mean, it was basically the same bunch of friends listening to Judas Priest and Halloween and Iron Maiden and, you know, drinking beer. There was a bunch of covers from all kinds of bands. But we really early, we started making our own music as well.
And you planned to be like 100% like this. Our show is 100% Sabaton music. Was the
I
idea?
mean, at that point, we didn't have a career plan or anything. We were just a bunch of guys drinking beer and having fun, you know?
Well, what about other people's covers that might be either unexpected or things that you think are a cover of something and they're not? They're a cover of something different.
Well, for me, I mean, I hadn't known when I heard Johnny Cash play Hurt when that was released. I think it was Rick Rubin who
Yeah,
did the
when they did the
arrangements for
American
him.
songs, yeah.
And I didn't know that was a cover until a year later, that it was a Nine Inch Nails song.
Oh, I remember the Nine Inch Nails version. I liked Nine Inch Nails back in the day.
Yeah.
Back in the day. You see, it's not just Gina G and Bailando for me. I have a fairly broad palette. Hey, you want to hear a good story about a cover?
Bailando, you should ask Tommy about that song.
Can we get a picture of Tommy? Can we get a picture of the Bailando girls too? Can we swap faces? Right now. Okay, wait, so what is the story with Tommy and Bailando?
No, you'll have to ask him, you know, it's...
Okay, damn it.
He swore me to secrecy.
Okay, ooh. No, but here's a thing of a cover of a cover. You know, the Kingsmen do the famous version of Louie Louie that everybody knows, you know, hello, hello, and everybody knows that and stuff. And a lot of people know that that song is a cover. But the original version was a guy named Richard Berry in 1955. And the original version, if you find it, which we don't have the rights to, but it's super cool. It's my favorite version. It's really smooth, like 50s R&B, right? But the Kingsmen had not heard that version. They didn't cover that version. There was a guy in the Pacific Northwest in like Washington State and Oregon, where the Kingsmen are from, called Rockin' Robin Roberts, who in the late 50s did a cover of that. And it has, because the original version doesn't go, hello, hello, that's not how the original version goes. Rockin' Robin Roberts sort of does some of that. But his cover sounds a bit like the original. But the Kingsmen cover sounds nothing like the original because they never heard the original. So they did a cover of the cover, thinking that they were doing a cover.
Man, I love artist names back in the 50s.
Rockin' Robin Roberts.
It's amazing.
Yeah. And Richard Berry was apparently no relation to Chuck Berry. But he was a California-based R&B dude in the mid-50s. The things you learn here on Sabaton History.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Well,
That's
I think that is
fascinating.
actually it for today's exciting tale of glory and covers. Glory. I'm still holding this, you know.
I think they want to see the end.
Okay, well, that is it for Joachim and myself for today's exciting episode of the Sabaton History Channel.
Thank you very much.
Okay, and insert cool explosion effects and stuff now.
All right, everyone, that's it for this week. So remember to click that bell. It's really important. Click it now.
Love
And
his
then,
shirt.
Hope to see you again in the near future. Bye-bye.
All right. So the ending was very cool. I love their interviews. I love listening to Joachim talk. The stories. And Indy has so much in his head, history-wise, from not only just music, but obviously history itself, that it's just fascinating to listen to him talk. To see Joachim in that type of environment, I've said it many, many times with Per and Joachim, that it's their passion about history that is just so appealing, right? They don't just perform songs to perform songs. They truly enjoy the historical piece of it. He's just so damn down to earth. You can't help but like him from a a person perspective, right? He's just a good dude. They all are. I mean, we see that with Tommy and how much of a family man Tommy is with what we saw during the 25 days or the 25 days with Tommy, which was awesome just to see a lot of those personal things, like with his sister at the ice hotel, with his niece singing. They're just good people. Damn. But back to the song, this was, I really liked this episode. Not only just the song, but just the overall history to give kind of the beginning of it, which I don't know, has been dove into that much as it just was. Man, I really go back to what I was saying earlier about waiting so long, right? We're talking about June, and was the thought, and maybe that's what it is, because we were talking about June 22nd. Was it that thinking that, July, August, September, and then you're getting into October, that by that time you would have already been in Moscow and had taken the Soviet Union? Was that truly the thinking, that it wasn't going to take that long? If that's the case, then you totally underestimated your enemy, and well, that's why you got your ass handed to you. Wow. It truly is fascinating. What ifs only count, what is it? Was it they deal with horseshoes and hand grenades? But truly, it's fascinating to think about, had some of these battles turned out differently, where would the world be? Man. Anyway, that's going to do it for this one. We've got new ones coming in next week. I've got to find a way to get Indy's channel in, because this is just getting to the point where I'm like, I hate to say craving it, but I really am. The historical piece is really, that itch is starting to get there to truly check it out. So with that being said, that's going to do it for this one. Thanks for sticking with me on this one. I know it's a long episode at 35 minutes, but man, this one was really, really cool. And go check out Radio Tapuk's versions if y'all haven't. I saw that, little clip, and I may go check him out as well and review it, just because that's damn good music. Anyway, that's going to do it for me. Y'all know who I am and what I'm about. I'm JTMM. Like, subscribe, and share. I'm out.